Welcome to the Archaeology in Your Community project. I am Marcia Anderson, and for today's assignment, I will be interviewing Todd Kepple, Museum Manager of the Klamath County Museum in Klamath Falls, Oregon.
Yeah, you bet. Well, the first thing I always tell people about our museum, which is a county-owned museum, is that it's very typical of hundreds and probably thousands of local history museums across the country that are not very well funded, and the quality of care of the collection varies tremendously among all these museums. And so this museum was established 58 years ago. It was established in 1954, and at one time had professional museum staff and several staff members, and then over the last 20 years, with the advent of property tax limitations in Oregon, the county has been withdrawing funds from the museum. And in some cases around the state, that has resulted in the closure of museums. For instance, in our neighboring county to the west, in Jackson County, they had a very fine museum system, and they lost their funding from the county, and now they have no museum at the county level there. They have some smaller community museums, but the Jackson County Museum, operated by the Southern Oregon Historical Society, was forced to close. We were able to avoid that here because we had a few political activists who said that they wanted to step forward and try to win some kind of public funding for the museum, public permanent funding. And so in 2006, they mounted a campaign to increase the county's motel tax rate by a small percent, and we got a portion of that increase, which was enough to ensure that the museum would not close and be liquidated. And then 2 years ago, in 2010, we passed a ballot measure for a 3-year property tax levy. So we have two sources of funding to keep the museum operating for the time being. Although those funding mechanisms don't yield enough revenue for us to get back to the point where we hire professional museum staff. So I myself am an amateur. I am a former newspaper reporter who decided it was time to get out of the newspaper business and was interested in this position. And so I applied for it and was lucky enough to get it. I've been working as the museum manager for 7 years, but don't have any credentials as a museum professional, and never try to pass myself off as any kind of historian or even a museum director. We don't have a museum director. I'm just a general manager of the business affairs until such point as hopefully someday we can turn this museum over to people that really know what they're doing.
Question.
Sure.
How do you keep yourself abreast of the needs of the museum and the interest of the public, and what vehicles do you use to connect yourself with historians and industries associated with the museum?
Well, the arrangement that we reached when I took this job with the county commissioners was that I had quite a bit of background in the community and knew a lot of people and already had a good layman's grasp of the history of the community. And so what I told them I thought I could do was to increase the visibility of the museum in the community through programs and publicity. But as far as care of the collection and building the institution and so forth, I said that's not going to be my strong area. But we are members of the American Alliance of Museums, formerly known as the American Association of Museums, and the American Association for State and Local History. So we read their magazines, and we frequently avail ourselves of their online resources, and whenever we can attend meetings of the Oregon Association of Museums. So we have a chance to rub elbows with our colleagues in other counties, some of whom are in the precise same situation that we are. Sometimes they have more expertise than we do, and we're able to call on them for help with specific issues and questions. So, we have tried to provide the minimum level of responsible care for the collection that we can considering that we are amateurs at that business. For instance, we've tried as we can to transfer paper and textile materials from non-archival storage containers to archival containers. And we've also worked on digitizing as much of our photo collection as we can in order to ensure its protection and accessibility that way. But as far as what we've probably done the best here is, I think what we have succeeded at is improving the community awareness that there is a local history museum. In fact, we have 3 county-owned museums. There's what we call the main museum here, the Klamath County Museum, that's located in the historic Armory building. It was converted to museum use in 1970. We have the Baldwin Hotel Museum down at the other end of Main Street, and then 35 miles north of Klamath, we have the Fort Klamath Museum. That's the site of the old Fort Klamath military post in the late 1800s.
Is there any exploration being done there, archaeological exploration?
Fairly recently, and I'm afraid I can't remember if it was, I think it was slightly over a year ago, last summer. A team from the University of Oregon came to Fort Klamath and did a ground-penetrating radar survey of a portion of the ground there. We saw that as kind of the first step in figuring out where things were actually on the ground. We have maps and diagrams of the fort grounds, including the 8 acres that's currently owned by the county. But we couldn't tell for sure exactly where on the ground anything was. And so now with that survey, we were able to locate the 4 graves of the Modoc Indians who were executed at the fort after the Modoc Indian War. And we located one of the barracks buildings with this radar. So we have yet to do any digging or even exploration or test digging. But we hope to bring a university team or some other team of archaeologists back to start doing a field study to figure out, what might still be under the ground up there.
That's exciting. Have you contacted anybody yet?
We're still waiting on the University of Oregon actually to produce the report from the radar survey. They are a little bit behind on getting that report to us. So once we have that report, then we'll sort of be positioned to take it to the next step to see if we can find someone that can come in and with a permit start doing some test digging.
Is there an interest within the community for this, or is this more of a scientific interest for the museum itself?
I think there is an interest with a fairly limited sector of the population who's curious about anything that has to do with the military or with the history of Fort Klamath. The general public, I would say, is more likely to be interested in stories of people. We've, I think, gotten a lot of interest in the community for our photo collection through some of the programs we've done. For instance, the newspaper, the Herald News, has been very kind to us by allowing us to run what we call a mystery photo once a week. And so for 2.5, closing in on 3 years now, we have run one photo a week in the newspaper and invited readers of the paper to contact us if they know who's in the photo or where the photo was taken, when it was taken. And that's turned out to be unbelievably popular. We've been very careful to pick photos that were interesting to look at. Even if nobody could tell us who's in the photo, they're still interesting photos to look at because they give us a snapshot of local history. But we occasionally are lucky and have someone call us and tell us exactly who's in the photo, and that's always fun when we can solve a mystery. But we have a lot of people who tell us that they look forward to seeing the mystery photo hoping that someday they'll be able to solve the mystery, but even if they can't solve the mystery, they still just enjoy looking at the photos. And the museum has done that before. In years, decades past, the newspaper would run a photo that they were looking for information on. It's different nowadays because we can also post the photo online, and the newspaper puts it on their website, and so these photos get forwarded to people all across the country and sometimes overseas, thanks to email and accessibility to websites. So I know one interesting case we had was we published a photo of the girls basketball team at Henley High School from I think it was about 1920, and we had no idea who the girls were in the photo. But after a couple of weeks, with some emails going back and forth, we found that one of the girls had a descendant who was living in Texas, and that lady had that photo in her family scrapbook with all the names. And so it took us a while for that information to get back to us, but now we're able to put those names with that photo in our collection, and that's pretty fun. We're also just recently we started posting a photo on our Facebook page, and we have about 460 people that have liked our Facebook page, and so that's a new way for us to reach people with some of our photo collection, and we get a lot of positive feedback from that. So to kind of get to the point of what I understood you wanted to hear about are ways that we have been trying to make history relevant. When I started this job 7 years ago, Marcia, I was under the impression that my main task was to get more people to come to the museum. And so we have tried opening new exhibits and having more programs and activities. And what I think I've learned is that it's really hard to change the number of people that are going to come to the museum, because some people are the type of people that go to museums and other people are not, and it's really hard to change people's habits that way. And so attendance at our museum is pretty flat. We haven't really lost any attendance, but we haven't gained any either, despite some fairly strenuous efforts to bring more people to the museum. The numbers haven't changed very much. But we have found that we can reach new audiences by using the internet, and I think you heard us talking earlier about a television program. We've done about 10 programs on our local community access channel. And they're, again, very amateurish programs, but we find people still enjoy watching them, and it's a way to reach people in their homes, delivering historical information when they probably would never come to the museum to see a program like that. But if they can watch it at home on TV, then they're just as content.
Particularly with the weather inhibiting traffic. And do you reach out to the schools, the elementary schools?
We do, and we're hoping to do a lot more of that. We have a number of schools that, teachers I should say, that bring their school or their classes to the museum. We saw a statistic or a fact that was publicized recently by the American Association of Museums, a study that someone had done about who visits museums, and what the study seemed to prove was that if people were taken to a museum by their parents or a relative when they were a child, then they probably continue to visit museums all their lives. But if a person managed to get through childhood and adolescence and become an adult and had never visited a museum, then they probably never will visit a museum. So this is probably true in all aspects of life. We do what we are trained to do when we're brought up by our parents and the rest of the village. So we do see an importance for getting school groups here and getting kids interested in visiting museums and studying history. So we'll continue to pursue that.
Well, Todd, I appreciate this time, and you've given me insights. The museum's lucky to have you.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.